أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to week number 2, recorded lecture number 4. Well, today we shall discuss communicating in organizations. This is the topic for our today's lecture. So let us move forward. Well, these two terms are quite common when you work for an organization from communication perspective. One is internal communication and the second one is external communication. So let us begin with internal communication first. Well, internal communication includes sharing ideas and messages with supervisors, subordinates within that organization. As the name suggests, internal communication, so this is within the organization. For example, if we take NED University example, now I being an employee at NED University, if I want to write a request to my chairperson or to my dean, that is, I'm writing to my supervisors or higher authorities, or I may write an email to my another faculty member or colleague like your class advisor. Again, we are co-workers, and then if I communicate something to my subordinates like our staff members or so. But one thing is common among all three situations, that all of us, whether they are chairpersons or deans or other faculty members or lower staff members, all of us are working for the same organization, that is NED University of Engineering and Technology. So when we say internal communication, it means communication within the organization, right? For example, this NED main campus may communicate something to LEJ campus or city campus, because all three are campuses of NED University. Same policies are there, same name is there, and in fact that is the same institution. So we call it internal communication. But if NED wants to communicate something to the University of Karachi, which is just across a wall, just next to NED University, but that will not be internal communication, because University of Karachi is a separate entity. It's a different institution, right? So internal communication takes place within the organization, and you may communicate to your supervisors, people at the same level or rank as you are, or your subordinates, right? Now moving towards point number 2, that is internal communication often consists of email, memos, and voice messages, right? Well, this if you are going for written communication, then quite often we write memos in organizations. Like if I want to write something to my superiors, my head of the department, my dean or PVC or VC, so usually we use memos, right? The full form is memorandum and memo is short form for it. We can also use email, right? Like our official emails to communicate with each other, and we can also send voice messages, though that is less frequent, and usually voice messages are not sent to the supervisors or seniors who are senior than you, but we can use it for our colleagues working at the same level as we are, or we can send it to our subordinates. Well, functions of internal communication include to issue procedures and policies, inform management of progress, develop new products and services, persuade employees or management to make changes or improvements, and coordinate activities and reward employees. So these are some of the functions that usually are performed within the organization, and for these functions we require internal communication, which can be both oral. Okay, now let's move towards external communication. Well, external communication is communication with customers, suppliers, government, and the public. Like as in the last slide, we have covered internal communication. Internal communication was within the organization with your own colleagues who can be your supervisors or seniors, people of the same rank as you are, and your juniors or your subordinates. But external communication is with the people outside your organization. Now, these are a few examples of outside of the organization. Like outside the organization, you can communicate with your customers, you can communicate with suppliers, or government. Like if you are already working for a government institution, then maybe you will be required to communicate with another government institution, or you may even be required to communicate with the general public, citizens of that country. For example, from any university perspective, say, let's take it from this perspective. Since we are in educational institutions, so for us students, you are our customers or clients, whom we should serve to the best of our level, and we do our level best to whatever possible extent it is possible, we try to facilitate our clients or customers, that's our students. Similarly, there must be many suppliers to NAD who supply different products or different equipment. Then like people working at NAD also have to communicate with them. We ourselves are a public sector or autonomous government body, but we have to communicate with other government departments such as Higher Education Commission, such as Education Department, Sindh, and other provincial and national government institutions. And we also have to communicate with the public when we publish different when we carry out different seminars or programs for common public awareness, and that is our communication with the public. But this all communication is external communication, right? Well, external communication generally consists of letters and emails. Like we saw in the last slide, that internal communication usually uses memorandum or memo for communication within the organization. Whereas for external communication, letter is a more common format for communication. And as you can see, emails can be used both for internal and external communication. And in fact, email is fast replacing both memos and letters. Okay. Now there are some. These are some functions, external functions of external communication. Like external communication in organization is carried out to answer inquiries about products or services, to persuade customers to buy products or services, to bring clarity to supplier specification, to issue credit, to collect bills, to respond to government agencies, and promote a positive image of organizations. Of course, different nature of the organization may have more or less functions. There may be some of these functions, and some organization may be limited only to few, and others may be having even more than that. So these are a few external functions that usually take place in an organization for external. Okay, so now let's move forward towards functions of business communication. Well, broadly speaking, functions can be divided into three. That is, to inform, to persuade, and to promote goodwill. Well, these three functions remain same both for internal communication and for external communication. For example, in internal communication, supervisors, co-workers, and subordinates, they can be informed about something, they can be persuaded for something, and the communication among them can take place to promote goodwill as well. So once again, broadly speaking, these three functions are there. Now similarly, for external communication, like communication, for example, customers, suppliers, government agencies, and the public can be informed about some policy or some new product or new service. Well, these all can also be persuaded for, maybe for a new product or for a new service that the company offers. And at times communication with customers, suppliers, government agencies, and public can be conducted to promote goodwill, organizational goodwill among the customers, suppliers, government agencies, and the public. Well, having discussed internal and external functions, now let us move towards oral and written form of communication in an organization. Now, to begin with oral communication, well, there are various forms of oral communication, and some of the forms include, like phone call is a form of oral communication, conversation is another form, interview is third form, is fourth form, and conference is fifth. There are a number of more forms, but just a few have been stated here for getting understanding and clarity. And these forms can be used, oral communication and its forms can be used both for internal and external communication. For example, a phone call can be used for internal and for external. Like you can call a colleague to discuss something, and you can also call a client for some discussion or persuasion or something else. Conversation again can be internal and external with a colleague or with a customer. Again, interviews can be both within the organization and outside the organization. Similarly, meetings are quite common within the organization and outside the organization. Similarly, for conferences, there can be internal and external participants. So it can also be used for both internal and purposes. Now moving towards advantages. And the first one among them is it minimizes misunderstanding. Well, if you are in an oral communication context, for example, in a personal meeting with your client or with a colleague, and there is some misunderstanding, the 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 person you are communicating with misunderstands some point, and you come to know that he or she has misunderstood. In case of an oral communication, you can quickly take action and you can clarify that misunderstanding uh, immediately. But in case of written communication, it can take longer, and it can even be more difficult to minimize misunderstanding. Now, second point, it enables to see each other's facial expressions and hear voice inflections. Well, facial expressions are possible only when either you are in a personal meeting, in-person meeting, or your communication involves video. Only then you can see facial expressions. And of course, facial expressions communicate a lot. It's not only verbal communication that is important, but non-verbal communication is also very important. And it is considered even in certain cases more important. So expressions, you can see them only in when you meet someone in person, or when you are in a video call or a video conferencing. Similarly, the voice inflections can change the meaning, whether someone uses the positive tone or harsh tone or low tone or high tone, right? Pitch, stress, and intonation patterns, they have a lot of meaning and they can change the meaning. So that is possible only when you are in oral communication with someone. You cannot do that if the communication takes place through an email or a letter. Well, the next advantage is it develops consensus when many people must be consulted. Well, if you have to reach a consensus, so instead of writing 20 emails to like 20 different people and then waiting for their reply and satisfying each one's that can take too long, and usually consensus but if it is an oral communication, a meeting, so all the members can easily be brought to a consensus, and that would be easier and faster than the written one. Well, last point, most of the people enjoy face-to-face interpersonal communication because it's easy, right? It's easy to go to your colleague's office and have a cup of tea with him or her and discuss the problem, as compared to writing an email, and where you have to think a lot, and you may have to go for multiple drafts and so on. Next, it feels warm. For example, uh, soon inshallah you will be graduating from ND University. Now say on your graduation day, when you post your picture on social media, say Facebook or Twitter, and there may be dozens or even hundreds of congratulations and uh, you know uh, likes and all that. Well, that's good, you feel happy about that. But what about if one of your friend calls you? Of course that will give you a warmer touch. And what if somebody reaches your home with a bouquet and congratulates you on your graduation? That would be even warmer than the previous one. So in oral communication one feels warm, and it's also natural, because of course naturally it's oral communication that connects friends. We'll continue with oral communication. Well, with a lot of advantages, oral communication also has some disadvantages, of course. Like, number one, it has no written record. You went to somebody's office, you discussed important points, and but there is no record for that. In case of written communication, if you had written an email or a memo or a letter, you would have had record for that. Next, it's sometimes waste of time, that the important point discussion was only for 2 minutes, but then you spent 20 minutes while discussing weather and discussing current affairs, and so those extra 18 minutes you could have given to some other work. If you had gone for written communication, you would have saved those 18 minutes, right? Sometimes it can be inconvenient. For example, taking example from Karachi, if you are working, suppose taking any example, well, if faculty or staff members from all three campuses are collected at one campus, so coming all the way from Sadr to University Road, and from LJ to University Road, and if there are, say, more people, so it can be inconvenient to them, taking more time, transport hassle, and other such problems. Well, moving towards the last disadvantage, that is, work has to be interrupted for oral communication. Actually, when you leave for a meeting, you stop doing something that you were already doing in your office, and then you go for to attend the meeting or to participate in that meeting. So work has to be interrupted. But of course, that having meeting again is official meeting, so it's again part of work. So these are some of the disadvantages, but of course advantages that we have discussed are far these few disadvantages for oral communication. To communication, well, the first thing about written communication, it is impersonal in the sense that two communicators cannot see and hear each other, hence unable to provide immediate feedback, right? So this is one thing, that it is impersonal. Like in oral communication, communicators have warm feeling, that's more common form of communication to develop a repo and goodwill with each other. Like, though repo and goodwill can be developed through written communication as well. And well, one thing that there can be delays in feedback in written communication. Like in oral communication, uh, during the oral communication, you could have taken feedback from someone's facial expressions, whether the person liked the idea or did not like the idea. But in written communication, you have to wait for the reply from the person. So, delayed feedback is there. Well, we cannot forget and ignore this fact that as much as 90% of business transactions involve written messages, right? So, in business, more weightage is given to written messages as compared to oral messages. Though in our personal communication, oral communication has more weightage, but in business transactions, you know, almost 90% messages are written for the record purposes, as we shall see in upcoming points. Well, forms of written communication. Well, a few forms of written communication include announcements, memo is written communication, email, fax, letter, report, proposal, newsletter, magazine, etc. Well, some of these forms are used for internal communication, others are used for external, and some can be used for both purposes. For example, announcement. Announcement is a written form of communication. It can be used both for internal and external. Memo. Memo is usually used for internal communication. Email. Email can be used both for internal and external communication. Then fax usually for external, letter for external communication. A report can be both for internal communication and external communication. Similarly, a proposal can be for both internal and external communication. Newsletters usually for external, but it can be used for internal also in large communication. Similarly, magazines mainly with focus for external communication, but it's also useful for internal communication. Well, moving ahead uh, to discuss advantages of written communication. So the first advantage is permanent record. Well, which was missing in oral communication. So once you write an email, a memo, or a report, you have a record for that. It's difficult to deny a written communication which has a record as compared to an oral communication, maybe a discussion that took place that does not have any record. So this is the strongest point of written communication, that it has permanent record. Number two, it's more convenient. As we took example in oral communication, that if we call people from all three campuses, NAD University, from LJ and city campus to this main campus, so it will be a bit inconvenient for them to come all the way, to face the traffic problems, and they will have to stop their work at their offices. Whereas written communication, if there is something that can be communicated through email, then it's always recommended that written communication should be used. So while sitting in their own offices without facing traffic hassle, and with saving travel time, they can very easily get that message on their computer or even smartphone in their own office. Economy, yes, written communication is more economical. For example, taking the same meeting example, if they would come, so they would spend a lot of time. Of course, time is money. They would also require transport to reach. Again, they would have to pay fare, or they would have to pay for the fuel, right? So in case of written messages, now all they require is an internet connection, that usually is, like at least in our case, that is available to all employees and even to students. So that is less expensive as compared to oral communication. Careful messages, another advantage, to me one of the biggest advantages, that in oral communication usually you do not have enough time to think, to organize, to ponder on your message, whereas in written communication you have enough time, you can consult different sources, for correctness of information, and you can even consult different dictionaries, softwares, to make your message more comprehensive, more careful, right? And next is easy distribution, that has already been covered, that if you send that email to 200 people, it might take you only a few minutes, but gathering 200 people might take you 2 days, right? So written communication has easy distribution. Of course, there are some drawbacks as well. The first drawback for written communication is it requires careful preparation and sensitivity to audience and anticipated effects. Well, it's both. It's a strength and it's also weakness. A strength in a way, because you have enough time to prepare, and drawback in a way that it requires a lot of time and you have to be sensitive to the audience, and audience can anticipate it in different ways. Next thing, again, that is the biggest advantage and it becomes the drawback as well, that is permanent record. Now if you make a mistake, that mistake becomes a permanent record. In case of oral communication, it would not become a permanent record. Next, it's difficult to prepare. It can demand good writing skills. Well, not everyone has good writing skills. Everyone is not a good writer. So if someone who is not good at writing skills wants to prepare a message, so that's going to be more difficult for him or her to prepare that message. Well, thank you very much. Inshallah, see you in the next live session, and before that we will of course have the next recorded lecture. So by then, take care. Thank you very much, and Allah Hafiz.